What would you say is the greatest challenge, but also what is the greatest opportunity when it comes to fundamental rights and freedoms in the context of the European Union today?
Well, in general, I think what the European Union needs to understand is that all the different crises that we are facing today are global crises. It's not only a crisis that is a matter and a concern for the European Union, but it definitely needs an in-depth dialogue and discussion, global discussion, taking into consideration different worldviews. And we do have certain values as the European Union. So when we look at the politics and also external actions of the European Union, what we see, I think, is also what is observed, from outside the European Union and perceived often as double standards. So on one hand, we want to sell our values and our values of fundamental rights, human rights. And at the same time, if you look at the realpolitics, the European Union is sometimes pursuing, we see a huge gap between these values and the realpolitics. So in that sense, I think we need to become more genuine. We need to have this critical, constructive engagement with different worldviews. We need to understand that our worldviews and probably our values are not the only values. And we need to respect also other cultural, political values. Yeah, but without being not critical. Yeah, and this per se is a challenge. And I think what is very important here is that we perceive, and I would say on a global level, really a certain agony with regard to the economic crisis we face, that we see that we have an economic system that makes the rich people richer, the poor people poorer, that we do have I would say a system of life, a way of life that it is based on exploitation of others. And we also have the huge ecological crisis. Yeah, but we are all very agonistic when we have a very much an attitude of agony when it comes to that. So what we need is, I think, because we also look at these different aspects in a very isolated way, we need to start thinking in a more complex way in general. So we do need a reform of our thinking. We do need to understand how these different aspects and crises we face are interrelated with each other. And that it is a global concern. It is a global concern when we look at the different seas, when we see how the seas are looking with all the plastic in the seas. It's a global concern when we see how the Amazonas is reduced and all these kind of things. And we need to start thinking, connecting, and finding also more complex solutions for this.
Since you mentioned that we also need a reform of thinking, especially also when it comes to global concerns, we can now say that we are all humans, but at the same time, we are also very diverse. So now I know that your institute is having this project, which is called Homeland Earth. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit about the concept. What does it include? What does it mean? Also in the context of renationalism. I mean, we saw that especially now in the COVID pandemic with the vaccination programs, when there was in the beginning quite, I would say, a very solidary approach in the beginning. But you can see like afterwards that states and nation states then started again to looking more at their nation borders to pick rosin. So how would you explain this concept?
Well, the concept of Homeland Earth was actually developed by a French philosopher and sociologist. His name is Edgar Morin. We started this campaign also because this year he will celebrate his 100th anniversary. And he's still very up to date. He shows up in TV shows. He's still writing books. So the concept that he developed with Homeland Earth in the 90s is basically looking at these different crises as a polar crisis of humankind. And what he says is, in order to be able to tackle these polycrises on a global level that we managed as human beings somehow to produce, but do not manage to solve, he says the first step would really be to understand that we are basically citizens of Homeland Earth. So we need a more planetary thinking, and we also need to develop a kind of emotional connection to this planet of Homeland Earth. So what he says is, it's not about giving up cultural diversity, not at all. It's not also giving up basically the love and the emotional connection you feel towards your homeland, towards your nation state. But what he says is we need to expand this emotional connection that we have to our own homeland to the whole planet. We need to expand it to the whole planet.
Since especially the conference on the future of Europe, which is going to take place approximately for the next 2 years, it also includes a bottom-up approach. So they want to also include civil society and also to shape opinion making on the European level. What role would you say could civil society or should civil society play also when it comes to this idea of awareness rising on especially what you just described, that this understanding that all of us, we need to understand that we are citizens of the homeland Earth. So what role of civil society in this process?
Well, I do think that it is very important of civil society and also academia to come up with visions. I think we are really missing visions for our future, for our planetary future. So I think it is important to generate visions and also to come up with strategies or show strategies how we could go towards this vision. Yeah, so that means we need to strengthen as civil society. We need to strengthen and guard, I would say, our values that we do have within the European Union. And we need to constantly also remind, politicians of these values and to ask for our accountability that they are also acting along these values. So this is one thing I think that is very important for civil society, bringing in new ideas, but also, showing ways how to implement these ideas.
We now live, I would say, in a globalized world. So this also meant that, for example, borders and distances were shrinking. So we managed to get into contact quite easily. Would you say that this globalization is actually, in this context, also a precondition to shape the awareness about this idea that we are all citizens of the homeland Earth?
Well, it's difficult to say if this is a precondition because it's a fact. Yeah, the globalized world today is a fact. The problem is that we are not aware of it, yeah? Or the normal citizens here in Austria, they are not aware of it, or any other country, how much globalized we are. I think we saw it with the pandemic now in the last year. It made it a little bit visible, this interconnectedness, and how, a virus that spreads up in Wuhan can, within a couple of months, basically spread all around the planet, shows this interconnectedness. And now I forgot your question. Oh, if this is the precondition for a global awareness. Well, in general, look, I think what we often underestimate is actually that we are, when it comes to communication, we are really living in a revolutionary time. Yeah. I mean, I grew up, I still remember as a child how excited we were when we got the first phone in our house. And look at this today, how we communicate with each other. And if I look back in history, if you look back to the invention of printing books of Gutenberg, no, in the 16th century, it's definitely proven that the invention of printing books was a precondition for the rising nationalism, yeah, and for rising nation states, and to develop actually an identity with the nation state. So definitely, I do think that this revolution that we see right now in communication will support also, I think, a global consciousness.
When it comes to the European Union and also the context, of course, of the future of the European Union, what would be your, let's call it wish, for the next 5 to 10 years, where the European Union should be developing?
Well, to be honest, I would like to see the UK back in the European Union. That would be nice. Because again, I do think that it needs much more cooperation in future. So what I would like to see and how the European Union would develop is actually, I think, the contrary to the trends that we have to observe now, because what we observe now is a strong militarization of the European Union. And I would like to see the opposite. As I said already, I really would like to see the European Union as a power of peace, be it internally, looking for more equality within the European Union, and be it also externally, that the European Union really positions itself and position itself as this peace power, strengthens, for example, its capacity for civilian conflict transformation, strengthens its capacity to be able to mediate also between different superpowers. So this is where I would like to see the European Union go. And of course, we also should not forget about the ecological dimension. So that means that the European Union should take its goals that it sets itself seriously, to reach these goals with regard to the ecological standards.